Racers, Austin here, Hyper. Today I'm going to show you how to install and remove your ARS eye on your ARS Shock for an A or B eye. So then you can either, if you have to take it off, to replace the spur gear inside or install your bump rubber. So let's get into it. Okay, so first thing, you want to check to see how many turns you have in your adjustment. So when you go and reset it, you have the exact amount of turns. This is very important to ensure that you keep your valving the correct. If you don't do this and set it back correctly, it'll mess up your valving. Either you'll not have enough adjustment to go through your whole range, or you'll have too much adjustment. Depending on your situation, that might help. If you don't like your valving, it's kind of a quick way to tune at the track, but in most cases you don't need to do that, and it's just good to get it set back to where you have it. That way you're consistent and have everything in working order. So first, we will so we got it turned all the way to one end of our adjustment, which is all the way open. We will then check our turns here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 3/4. We'll call that 6. All ARS shocks either have between 4 to 6 turns total on their adjustment, depending on what valving you have and which corner of the race car you're working with. So now that we know that we have 5 3/4 turn of adjustment, we can then break loose our eye, and we will do that. I like to use a crescent wrench and then a 3/4 wrench for your jam nut. With the crescent wrench, adjustable wrench, you can kind of put it on there. I like to put it on, kind of put it on a good area. It doesn't mess up the eye too much. You could make a special tool, but this will get it done for everybody at the track. You know, you don't have to buy anything or do anything special on that end. So you can either put it up on there on the top of the eye or down below. I like to put it right there. It's a little more solid for myself. You'll then get it on there and break your jam needles. So now that we got that loose, we'll then 5/32 Allen is what you'll need for the worm gear here. Now this is very important that you do this so you don't destroy the brass spur gear in there. That's very soft compared to your worm gear that's mated up. And if for some reason in the season, if you're replacing your spur gear, it's usually because you went on one end of the adjustment too much or the other way and stripped the gear off. It's actually the most common problem with the ARS shock, as far as when somebody, you lose your adjustment or somebody calls in for themselves and says their shock doesn't adjust anymore. That's usually the case because of that. So if your spur gear is already stripped, then don't worry about it. You can just take that off, turn that all the way off, and it doesn't really matter. But if you're in good working order and to install our bump rubber here, or just to replace the eye, you will need to do this procedure. So it kind of actually just turns itself. So once you get going, you will turn it clockwise on the back, and it kind of just works itself off. You can actually just, depending on how dirty your eye is on the inside, you can actually just kind of do it with your hand. So you get to a point where you won't feel any resistance anymore. So we'll get this thing turned off. So there, don't feel any resistance. Get it up, get it off, and then your spur gear is down there. This is your adjuster needle, and we got our jam nut here. So you will need to get your spur gear out One, you can either use a small flathead screwdriver, or I got this pick here, or a dentist tool. Kind of work it around in there. Get your spur gear out. So that's your spur gear. So now that we got those off, we will install our bump rubber. You need to take your jam nut off. So now that we got our jam nut off, we got our bump rubber here and our top washer. Bump rubber goes on first with your top washer. Make sure you always run a top washer. This is a steel one and it's beveled. The bevel goes down against the bump rubber. You need this to ensure your bump rubber doesn't go up against the eye. If you just have that and that, this ends up working into the eye and you end up losing your effective spring rate. So make sure you always have this. So you will install your bump rubber and then your washer. And when you install your bump rubber, make sure your marker is below. That way you can check your travel. That is very key when using the bumps. So you'll install your bump rubber, your top steel washer. You will then install your jam nut. Just go all the way to the bottom of the threads. And we'll then get your spur gear. It is the shoulder goes into the shaft. Now, if you've done everything correctly, you will always have to make sure, you can turn this. If you didn't turn it out right and you got your needle sticking out somewhat, you will need to make sure you got your circuit closed off. Your adjustment needle all the way down into the shaft. This has to be stopped. So put your spur gear on and then just turn it till it stops. You have to do that. Then I always like to reapply a little bit of grease. So we got that on there. Now we can install our eye. Then put your eye on and turn it on until you feel it just grab the spur gear. The worm gear and the spur gear will try to meet up here. Alright, I have now gotten to the point where the worm gear and the spur gear want to coincide with each other. So, what you'll do here is get them to mate up. Just kind of work it with your fingers. It should not be forceful. If you force it, you'll end up breaking the spur gear. You have to replace it again and take it all the way off. So this part, you have to be very gentle and massage well. You will turn clockwise, and it pretty much if you're doing it right, it pretty much just turns itself on. Like when you were taking the eye off, it kind of just works itself way off just naturally. So you will turn it clockwise until you reach, until it bottoms out here and you've closed off the gap and space that is inside there. Alright, so I've reached the end and now it is bottomed out against the spur gear. So to make sure I have the adjustment range I need to come off one full turn with the eye. Notice where I have this mark. I'm going to turn it around and come back to that point. So we will come off like we were taking the eye off and work together. So I got one full turn off. Now, tighten up my jam nut. That's tight. Now I'll check to make sure I set it back to where I had it, which was 6 turns. So Go to the end of our adjustment there. I'm all the way open. So we'll go ahead and, or actually I'm all the way closed. It doesn't matter which end you do it on. It just needs to be on one end of the adjustment or the other. So I'll check here. So we'll go. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 3/4. We had 6. I'm not going to change too much. I'll call that good. And there you go. That is how you take off and remove your eye to install either your bump rubber or replace your spur gear.